Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Today on the podcast, we're covering some international content with a very specific fire, which will always go down as the fire in the sky. This was a terrifying blaze at 200 Wellesley, which brought a fire crew to its knees and changed the way Toronto fights fires forever. This incident debrief features one of our guests, episode 311, high-rise firefighting with Brent Brooks. So, after this one, maybe go back and listen to Brent again as we delve into this debrief for today. So, firefighter Brent Brooks was in the stairwell of a burning high-rise when a member of his crew staggered down from the 24th floor. The man was retreating from a blaze so fierce that the water being used to fight it was boiling in the hallway. His face was black with soot and he had wrenched off his breathing apparatus. He dropped to his hands and knees, gasping for clean air close to the ground. He was trying to tell Brooks that two firefighters on the fire floor, 2 stories above them, were running out of air and needed to be rescued. But he had inhaled so much smoke he couldn't speak. "We knew something horrible was going on," said Brooks, whose job that day was to keep track of the incoming crews and their assignments. A job rendered so complex by the crew of firefighters pouring in to respond to the 6th alarm that Brooks tossed aside his clipboard and began keeping track on the wall. On that day of the fire at 200 Wellesley Street in September 2010, Brooks had been a Toronto firefighter for 15 years, 4 of them on the department's specialised high-rise truck. He believed that then he knew everything there was to know about high-rise fires. The firefighter at 200 Wellesley would prove him wrong. There's a saying, good luck can teach you bad habits. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Godiva Limited. Godiva is one of the world's leading providers of specialist equipment for emergency services market. Godiva produces a comprehensive range of fire pumps, including vehicle-mounted, portable, and their cutting-edge integrated total water flow control system, SAMFlows. I've been using Godiva my entire career as a reliable pump on the fire ground. It is such a crucial element of a successful firefighting team that you want to empower your crews with the very best, reliable, quality product. Reach out to our partners by checking the notes in the podcast. Now back to the show. The fire was like nothing he or anyone else on site that day had ever seen. It started at 5 p.m. and burned uncontrollably for 6 hours, with hot spots still glowing like coals at 3 a.m. the next day. It launched Brooks on a mission that would transform his career and change the way high-rise fires were fought in Toronto. 30 minutes after the first alarms rang out that evening, as Brooks kept track of operations from the 22nd floor, apartment 2424 remained an inferno. Nearly a dozen firefighters had already tried to access the unit to drown the roaring blaze with water. The fire started on the 24th floor when a cigarette landed on the balcony of 2424, igniting hoarded papers and books. The occupant, Mr. Stephen Valeslev, had accumulated a mountain of documents in his legal battle against banks and had foreclosed on his investment properties. He wasn't home at the time, and his front door was stuck, partially open, and debris had fallen behind it. So imagine the scene, an apartment filled with boxes and boxes of paperwork. We're literally talking hoarders here, and it was all over his balcony as well. The wind, obviously coming in from the balcony, was pushing the fire, smoke and heat into the corridor, giving that blowtorch effect. The fire wasn't dying down, said Brooks. If you have a couch fire, eventually that couch is going to get smaller and we're going to be able to gain entry into the apartment. But in this case, it wasn't getting smaller, it just kept getting worse. The hoarded papers were acting like fuel cell. The overhead lights were melting in long, gooey strings of plastic, aluminium from the casings that fell in droplets. Visibility was literally zero. 3 firefighters from Brooks' crew were applying water to the flames in Unit 2424 when the alarms on their breathing apparatus went off, signaling that they would soon be out of air and had to turn back. Staying low, to avoid the worst of the heat, they were crawling across undulating fire hoses on the ground, searching for the stairwell to relative safety, hopefully 2 floors below. Only one of the 3 firefighters made it. That was the firefighter crouching, mutely, on the 22nd floor in front of Brooks. Another lost consciousness in front of a bank of 3 elevators, and the third dropped to the floor a few feet opposite. He summoned the last of his breath to speak into his radio. Mayday, mayday, mayday. The message crackled across the radio handsets of personnel on the scene of that 6th alarm fire, literally stopping them in their tracks. I'm out of air.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
The fire that day triggered a deep rethink within the department. It changed everything, from what hose and nozzle package to the use and how we deployed personnel to how much air firefighters should carry on their backs, and what kind of fire trucks roll up in front of the building when an active fire is confirmed. It brought more than better science to bear on the complex task of fighting high-rise fires in the city that has become one of the most vertical in North America. It overturned conventional thinking about how such fires should be fought and inspired policy changes that would take years to implement. And not a moment too soon, Toronto itself is expected to grow by 1 million people by 2030, and most of them will live in high-rise towers, much like the challenges we face in the UK. More than 500,000 residential units were added to that city alone between 2016 and 2020. High-rise buildings represented 43.1% of all residential structure fires in Toronto Fire Service in what they responded to in 2020. And more than half of the city's fire fatalities, according to a recent report in the City Council, if you live in one, what Toronto Fire learned in 200 Wellesley may save your life. Out-of-control fires in high-rise are rare. Fire alarm systems, concrete walls and floors, and fire-rated doors mandated by many countries across the world, including Ontario construction codes. These things really go a long way to containing fires within their individual units. Provincial fire code regulations, which are very common over there, also require routine inspection and maintenance. Firefighters liken it to beehive, which is one cell in a high-rise can be destroyed without affecting any other cells or the integrity of the hive itself. The exterior cladding that turned Grenfell Tower in London into an inferno in 2017 is not permitted in Toronto. Another difference, there was only one stairwell in Grenfell. Most buildings in Toronto have at least 2 stairwells and often 3. On the other hand, however, more than 2,800 high-rises in Toronto were constructed prior to 2010, when sprinkler systems, one of the most effective tools against the spread of fire in high-rises, were not required. Toronto Community Housing Complex at 200 Wellesley Street is one of those buildings. Firefighter Bill Baker's crew was on a nearby medical call when the fire at 200 Wellesley broke out. His team responded to the second alarm. From outside the building, it looked routine to Baker. He thought he'd be back at the fire hall in half an hour maybe. It looked like a lot of fires in Toronto, he'd explained. I didn't think anything of it. Until he approached the door of 2424 with his crew, the amount of heat that was coming out of there was like a blast furnace. We were trying to play water into the fire unit itself, and it was just not achieving anything. The water was just turning into steam, said Baker, who's now a division chief of training in Toronto Fire Service. It was the fire that wouldn't go out. Baker and his crew went back 4 times, each time after returning the ground level for new air cylinders, and by the 3rd trip, there were firefighters lying on stretchers outside recovering from the heat stress. The normally loquacious Baker sat quietly for a time in a cooling chair, equipped with trays of waters for his arms to bring down the core body temperature, as we know as radial cooling. Baker's not talking. Must be pretty bad, cracked a colleague.
MSA are supporting us on today's podcast, and I chose to partner with them because I've been wearing this stuff for nearly 20 years, and they are the global leader in development, manufacture, and supply of incredible, safe products that really protect people, not just our communities out there, but also first responders, most importantly, all over the world. Get yourself over to MSA and have a look at it. The high-performance protective clothing for emergency services responders. They also partner with us on the UK Pink Firefighters. That's because we love them. The helmets with the reflective visor, the F1XF, absolutely epic helmet. And not forgetting how they improve firefighter safety through their connectivity in the connected firefighter platform. MSA are always pushing the envelope, and it's a real privilege to be able to continue to grow our partnership together. So whether it's your PPE, your bunker gear, your helmets, your SCBA, your thermal imaging, your Luna, or your portable gas detection, both of us know that this equipment needs to work. It needs to be high quality, reliable, and dependable in the moment. And that's why I use MSA, because they know what's at stake.
Residents of the building were inundating 911 with calls. some of them screaming in fear within their units, saying they were on fire, in some cases mistaking smoke or heat for approaching flames. The wind was also spreading, and the fire from the balcony in 2024, piled high with hoarded paper, was moving onto the balconies. The longer the fire lasts, the more time smoke gets to travel, and the residents were spooked by the smoke, curling under doors and drifting through ductwork. The building was evacuated by firefighters, although some residents were able to shelter in place in their apartments throughout the entire fire. On Baker's fourth trip, the door to 2424 was burned away. Baker and two of his crews entered the living room, and Baker was at the entrance to the unit, his colleagues ahead of him in the living room, when he saw a floor-to-ceiling wall of fire moving toward them from the bedroom, and his colleagues had their back to it. It wasn't coming at 100 miles an hour, but it was coming, said Baker. The fire was on us. Baker pulled the hose they were holding back and forth and signaled for them to leave. By the time we had gone, it had gone for the ceiling. We would not have lasted in there another 30 seconds. He considers it a miracle no one was killed that day. Now, wind-driven fires are hardly new. This phenomenon should be familiar even to a lot of firefighters across the UK. It can occur even in a bungalow. But wind speeds increase with height, as you should know if you've ever been up a high-rise building in London, as an example. And as cities expand ever upwards, wind-driven fires are becoming more of a concern for fire departments everywhere. It's a world problem, not a London problem or a City of Toronto problem. A wind-driven fire in a bungalow can be fought from the outside. A wind-driven fire on an upper floor or a high-rise must of course be fought from indoors. And there are hundreds, sometimes thousands of residents to manage during these processes. It also takes longer to begin fighting a high-rise fire. A house fire, you pull up, you're on scene, you're good to go, you can see your hydrants, but you show up to a high-rise building, you've got to travel. On average, it can take 6 minutes for people to get to the fire floor, and then they have to set up, which can take another 6 minutes. So imagine pulling up to a normal house and then having to wait 12 minutes before getting to work. A terrifying feature of wind-driven fires is how quickly they can overwhelm firefighters and residents. In 1994, 2 women in the Bronx were killed by a fire on the 18th floor of a residential tower. The woman in the burning apartment was knocking on doors, trying to get one of her neighbours to call the fire department. Finally, a neighbour across the hall opened a door. Both women were later found dead, one with the phone still in her hand. When the door was opened, heat currents from the burning apartment travelled down the hallway, killing them instantly, according to New York Fire Department Battalion Chief Jerry Tracy. In the seminal video for the National Institute of Standards and Technology, we were starting to see things we'd never seen. Toronto had a similar fire as well, at 2 Forest Laneway in North York in 1995. It began in a couch in a unit on the 5th floor of a 30-storey rental building. The occupant tried to put the fire out himself, opening his balcony door to vent the smoke. Neighbours came in to help, but they were unable to extinguish the flames. Everyone were treated, leaving the apartment door open, and wind, of course, blew into the apartment through the balcony door, across the fire, and through the open door. 6 people died, including a 16-year-old girl. They were overcome by smoke in the stairwell. Sometimes the dynamics of wind-driven fires work the other way, providing what firefighters call areas of refuge. At 200 Wellesley, residents on the same floor as the burning unit were able to shelter in place for the whole duration of the fire, including the man in the apartment right next door to the burning unit, as a resident across the hall, who took refuge in their balcony and kept the balcony door shut, was instructed by firefighters to prevent the fire from finding a flow path through their unit. The fire departments have learned about these areas of refuge, and it's influenced the thinking on routine evacuations. In fact, the rules many of us learned as children, leave the building by the nearest stairs and sound the fire alarm, have changed entirely. Wind-driven fires had not been deeply studied until fire departments in New York City, Chicago, Toledo were able to conduct a series of experiments in abandoned high-rises on the Governors Island, New York in 2009. Researchers had to first understand that wind-driven fires were a phenomenon. Then they had to find funding for research and suitable locations to experiment in real time. A wind-driven fire that killed 3 New York firefighters in 1998 was the trigger, but it took 12 more years, which is unsurprising when you really do think of the glacial pace of change that happens even here in the UK. The 9/11 attack in 2001 set things back to draw together the right resources to conduct the experiments and set the results into the hands of firefighters, said Dan Madzikowski, Direct Research for UL Firefighter Safety Research Institute in Columbia. A resultant research and DVD about it were made available at the Fire Department Instructors Conference in 2010. Dan said it takes time to get the word out, and then it takes time to adjust the training. How relevant does that sound to people in the UK? So the Governor's Island experiments found that in buildings like 200 Wellesley, the wind-driven fire will move from the windward to the leeward side of the building. Units on the leeward side risk creating a flow path if a window is blown out or a door is opened or burned away. Anyone in the flow path is at risk of being killed by the blowtorch effect experienced by firefighters at that very incident. Units on the same side of the building as the unit on fire remain safe from smoke and heat. At Wellesley Street, a firefighter struggling down the hallway from the burning apartment accidentally fell into a unit on the same side as 2424 and was shocked to find it free of smoke. Standing up, he watched from safety inside the apartment as smoke and heat streamed down the hallway in front of him. The apartment he had fallen into was on the windward side of the fire. At the time, most fire departments in North America, including Toronto, were at the beginning of their understanding of wind-driven fires and how to fight them safely. A lot of stuff, you have to experience it and you have to put the science into it. It's the whole you've got to see it to believe it. Sometimes physics is not so easy unless you don't have that practical example. We are, after all, kinesthetic learners, most of us, in the fire service. Firefighting knowledge has been passed down from experienced firefighters to new recruits since Rome was divided into 14 fire districts. Tradition is the bedrock of fire departments all over the world, and some fire stations, for example in the US, still use wooden ladders, and firefighters have been known to resist change. Firefighters hate two things. They hate the way things are and they hate change. Even if they're including seatbelts in fire trucks and the protective bunker suits they now wear. When I came on 30 odd years ago, you were under the tutelage of your crew, and they taught you a lot of experience, said Jeff Bosu, Operational Divisional Commander, Training and Continuous Improvement, Toronto Fire Service. To a large extent, that's still the case. Firefighters still learn from one another as we should in mentoring relationships and so on. After every major fire in Toronto, Bosu puts together a team to dissect what went well and what didn't go well. Interviews are conducted with the crews and incident commanders. The resultant reports and recommendations, if any, are required reading for firefighters across Toronto Fire's 84 stations. It's a self-critique. It's let's take an honest look at ourselves. How did we do? Boysu believes that firefighters are now more open to change. Today's recruits have more education and a different attitude, which Boysu sums up in this way. You can't just tell me how to do it. You got to tell me why. Baker says he went into fighting the fire at 200 Wellesley with the knowledge that he had been handed down to him by the old vets who had staffed firehouses when he was a recruit. Never ever open a hose line until you see the fire. Baker said that's what he was always told. This is the older guy, smoking a cigar, telling you, get your ass wet on the job, son. Those guys, that's absolutely who we all learned from. And they were now good firefighters too. Now, Baker's not trying to put these down. That was what they were taught, passed down from generation to generation. It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. But here's the honest truth. It takes a colossal amount of time and work to keep the podcast going. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. Now, by joining this, you'll not only support the future of the podcast, but also gain access to exclusive benefits. Now, if you've ever wanted to meet a member of the podcast, buy us a beer, buy us a coffee, and you think anything you've ever listened to on the podcast has been worth £3, that's basically what we're asking you for. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, instant debriefs, and so much more. A growing collection of valuable resources to help you learn and grow. Your support in whatever way, dropping it in the WhatsApp group, sharing it on the local newsletter, whatever it is, it's incredibly valuable and we really do support it. And we need it to make it a long-lasting resource, that legacy resource we always talk about for first responders, firefighters, and everybody everywhere who's ever been interested in joining the fire service. Now, if you're already supporting something, as many people do, it's totally cool. You can still access the podcast for free and you'll always be able to access all the new episodes for free. But we're asking for your help to make this sustainable. And we want to keep growing, we want to keep sharing the insights, and we want to keep showcasing the incredible work happening in our community and our sector. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes. But at Wellesley, firefighters use fog nozzles. which issue a finer spray than other nozzles, often likened to fog or mist, instead of the larger hoses fitted to the smoothbore nozzles that pump larger volumes of water that drown the fire as quickly as possible. Fog nozzles actually do date back to the 1940s when they were found, based on experience to be effective in putting out small interior fires. It was also believed that using fog nozzles resulted in less water damage. Fog nozzles still have their uses, but they were the wrong fit for the fire 24 stories in the sky, driven by wind and being fought through a narrow hallway. The thinking in Toronto today is to get as much water as possible, as quickly as possible, on the high-rise fire, using large diameter hoses and smoothbore nozzles. The smoothbore nozzles have an added advantage. Not all buildings keep their standpipes in top shape. They're same in the UK. Some are damaged, some have lots of things put into them, some of them are all smashed up a little bit. A smoothbore nozzle will allow debris, from leaves to mice to even needles, which you'll find in standpipes sometimes, to flow through them. Debris that can become stuck in a fog nozzle, resulting in a reduced water flow. There's another faulty assumption at play that day at the fire at 200 Wellesley. Firefighters were packing 1,200 litre air tanks, which in theory are supposed to last 30 minutes. The experience at Wellesley, coupled with the scientific research, proved that theory dead wrong. At the time of the Wellesley Street fire, Toronto Fire Services and researchers from the University of Waterloo had already begun investigating the length of time it takes firefighters to go through a 30-minute 1,200 litre tank of air. Firefighters have known for a while that the actual duration of work while wearing a self-contained breathing apparatus set was considerably less than 30 minutes. The study in fact showed that firefighters working under only moderately difficult conditions would get to a quarter tank in as little as 11 minutes. Conducted with researchers at the University of Waterloo, the study was published in October 2010 edition of Applied Physiology, Nutrition and Metabolism, less than a month after the Wellesley. Follow-up studies would show that extreme heat can impair cognitive function, critical to firefighters who face a myriad of high-stakes decisions. Now, Toronto firefighters are equipped with 1,800 litre air tanks. The alarm goes off after 10 minutes to give them an ample time to return safely. Brooke was close to the two firefighters who went down on September 24th at 200 Wellesley Street. One was his friend, and the other was his captain. Now, when a firefighter goes down and it's your best friend, you just want to go. You want to drop what you're doing and just go and get them, or at least attempt to, but you can't. And that's tough, said Brooks. But everyone did what they were supposed to do. They followed their training, and both firefighters were rescued. One was by Toronto Rapid Fire Intervention Team, who are tasked uniquely with locating and saving firefighters who go down in fires. The second rescue was good luck and quick thinking, to be honest. A team of firefighters took the building's elevator to the 24th floor. As soon as the doors opened, black smoke began pouring in, and the firefighters began pushing buttons rapidly and frantically to close the doors and return to the lobby. Then they heard an alarm go off. The alarm that attaches to the firefighter's breathing apparatus and goes off when they stop moving. An ADSU, as we know in the UK. Blindly, they just reached out towards the sound and they found the firefighter. They dragged him into the elevator and used their own face mask to provide him with air. The perils of being exposed to a fire are varied and increase with the duration of exposure. Off gases like hydrogen cyanide created with synthetics burns. Just one danger, really. Superheated air that's found in smoke can burn and cause swelling to the windpipe, the throat and the lungs, and in extreme cases causes irreversible organ damage. The soft tissue between the cartilage and the trachea can burn. It causes inflammation, restricting the airway. Your brain can live for like 4 minutes without oxygen. But as it shuts down, it pumps the heart and lungs even quicker. And that accelerates the poisoning. It was horrible, and it seemed like hours for them to get out. And you know, when we did get them out, they didn't look good at all, said Brooks. That fire changed the course of Brooks' career. I remember the fire was finally knocked down after 5.5 hours, and I thought, we can't do this again. It's way too dangerous. There is nothing that anyone that was there had ever experienced, said Brooks. He threw himself into studying high-rise firefighting, attending conferences around the world, visiting London to study Grenfell Tower disasters. He's been to Spain, England, France, New York City, and Chicago. He says he tries to hit 4 conferences a year. He actually joined the Council of Tall Buildings headquarters in Chicago and has become one of the experts in high-rise firefighting for Toronto Fire Services and all of the world, to be honest. That's why we had him on the podcast. Brooks and Baker even designed the 2 new fire trucks that are now in use in Toronto. Brooks has turned his Burlington garage into a workshop. Yes, he's one of those fire freaks. When he explores the principles of wind-driven fires and he works out ways to teach new recruits about these phenomenon, he works on small improvements to equipment and procedures because in a fire, every second counts. In the corner of his house, he has this doll's house machine, and it's kind of like the ones you see all over the world. He does mock-ups and resembles almost the layout that's exactly in Wellesley. Within it, it produces smoke in the same way that the unit did, and driven by a fan to mimic a wind-driven fire, smoke pours down the hallway of the doll's house. By using levers to open and close doors to the apartments, Brooks is able to demonstrate the impact of wind-driven fires. Apartments on the windward side of the doll house, the side the fan is blowing on, stay free of smoke and fire even when a door, window, or both are opened. They're protected by the same wind feeding the fire next door. Residents in the apartments on the opposite side of the unit, that is on fire, the leeward side, are at risk of death if they open their window or door, which will let in smoke and fire. Now, if they were both opening their doors and windows, they'd be creating that flow path that we speak about, putting them at a much greater risk of death, and it can happen in seconds. Brooks has built loads of these dollhouses, condos, for miniature firefighters in as well, to demonstrate what happens when someone opens the wrong door or window during a wind-driven fire. He's tried to capture it on GoPro and camera placed on a tripod near the prop, and he's never been able to because each time the dollhouse bursts into flames and it melts the plastic firefighters and the GoPro. He says it's instantaneous. Over the many years that have passed since 200 Wellesley, Toronto Fire Service have applied the lessons learned to how high-rise fires are fought in the city. If a fire alarm sounds, it's now recommended that high-rise residents, unless otherwise instructed, remain in their units, keep their doors and windows closed, and wait for instructions from firefighters. Those firefighters will take over the building's public address system. Acting Toronto Fire Chief Jim Jessup says that many fire deaths in high-rise occur in stairwells, where people attempting to evacuate the building are overcome by smoke, and it can happen quickly. If the fire is in your unit, you should leave immediately. Toronto Fire advises that you close the door behind you, but don't lock it, as firefighters may require access. Then exit the building by the nearest stairwell. Toronto Fire does not recommend climbing to the roof to be rescued by helicopters, because that only works in the movies, folks. And for those fighting the fire, there are changes. The department has 2 specially kitted out fire trucks with new equipment that includes lightweight hoses that are easier for firefighters to carry upstairs but deliver more water once they're hooked up. Smoothbore nozzles have replaced fog nozzles, delivering a strong stream of water. That, right now, is like punching a fire in the throat, said Baker. Smoothbore nozzles have fluorescent bumpers on the tip and fluorescent inserts in the handle that are visible in smoky conditions. The trucks carry nozzles that can be squeezed into a small space to blow water into the unit from outside it. Double-headed nozzles also create an ability that allow crews to fight fires on the building exterior. The curved nozzles that can be deployed out the window and blow water into the unit from the floor above or below, or even beside it. You've seen some of these in the UK. Firefighters even have access to aerosol extinguishers that are like grenades. They pull the pin on them and toss them into a fire from a distance. They've got more options than they used to. Toronto Fire has also purchased the tallest articulating aerial tower in North America, the Bronto. Went on the run a long time ago now. And it has an articulating boom with a basket that can reach 230 feet. That's 70 meters here in the UK, which is nearly twice the reach of typical aerial devices, which goes up to about 20 floors, really. Now, when they pull up to a high-rise, firefighters look for the telltale signs of a wind-driven fire. Wisps of smoke escaping from a window, which can signal that the fire has turned the hallway into a chimney, perhaps. There are new procedures around how to open doors on wind-driven fires if we suspect it, and how much air firefighters carry. Fire teams also have way more people in them. It takes a fantastic number of people to fight a fire in a high-rise. The National Fire Protection Association recommends dispatching a minimum of 43 firefighters to a high-rise, adding or subtracting further resources as necessary. Even with all the improvements, it is hard, arduous work. Once, Brooks says he had to walk up 68 floors in a building under construction where the elevators were locked up at night. It was fun, he says, but after the 22nd floor, you get a sweat on, and then it almost becomes a challenge. Toronto Fire estimates it will need to hire another 156 firefighters before the end of 2025 to meet the escalating demands created by high-rises. We are responsible for challenges that, candidly, outside of New York City, no other fire service in North America has, said Jessup. Brooks is now retired, and he's been on the podcast, and what an incredible man he is. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but on one hand, he has so many projects awaiting him. He travels all around the world, speaking and passing on the lessons learned. He still loves the job. And with more cities building upwards, the need for training firefighters in complicated tasks of firefighting fires inside them is building too. Brooks recently went standing outside 200 Wellesley Street many years after the fire that burned for 6 hours and somehow miraculously killed no one, and which transformed his life and work forever. Brooks looks up at the mural that runs most of the length of the building's south face. It was initiated by Steps, which is a charity that supports public art. It was painted by professional artists working with local youth, and it's meant to symbolise the resiliency of residents in the area. As 1,700 people were initially displaced by the fire for weeks and months, really, and more than 600 tenants brought a successful class action lawsuit against the former operators of the building because they had failed to take steps that could have prevented the fire. And they won $4.85 million. The mural on the side of the building was rendered in bright yellow and red, like the flames of the fire that changed the lives of those who lived in the building on September 24th, 2010. Those who showed up that day to save them, their lives were also changed. The procedures, and think about how many lives were saved after that. Everyone's benefited from it. And we can too, if we listen to these lessons and embed it in our UK procedures. The picture, by the way, on the side of the building, it's a phoenix risen from the ashes. That brings us to the end of this one, folks. That was one of my favourites. I really enjoyed that. I hope you took a lot away from it. That was Fire in the Sky, the terrifying blaze at 200 Wellesley, which brought a fire crew to its knees and changed the way Toronto fights high-rise fires forever. Maybe there's some lessons in there for us as well. Maybe you're going to share them. Maybe you'll drop it into the WhatsApp group. Maybe you'll send it on the email. Maybe you'll embed it in the next recruit's training. Maybe you'll put it on your service weekly update thing that some people still read, apparently. Of course we do. I do as well. It's essential learning. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you took a lot away from it. Be sure to check the notes for this. You can go, and I'll also put a link in there for Brent Brooks, episode 311, remember. Go back and listen to Brent in person and make sure these lessons are passed on. Make sure we learn from them so we don't have to repeat them. Right. Thanks for coming back to the Firefighters podcast. I'll see you on the next one.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, live with intention, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.